As promised earlier, we do have on the other side of the phone line the federal member for Wills, Mr. Peter Khalil, Labour MP. Peter, I welcome you to 3XY's Drive program.
Thank you, John of Khalil. Thanks for having me on your program.
Our pleasure, our pleasure. Now, you alongside Mr. Anthony Albanese and Shadow Minister for Multicultural Affairs, Andrew Gills, launched the Labour Multicultural Engagement Task Force a couple of weeks ago. Do you want to talk to us about that to start off our conversation?
Yeah, sure, John. It was a report that we launched after I chaired the task force. We had consultations around the country for 18 months. Some of it was during COVID on Zoom last year. We met and spoke to community leaders from all of the different multicultural communities around the country, stakeholders, faith leaders, the whole works. And we had about 65 written submissions to the task force as well. And we launched a report that had recommendations around how we can do better if Labor wins government to provide services and access for various communities, Greek-speaking community or Italian or whatever it might be, access for their federal services as well as support for business as well, and small business, which migrants have been very successful in.
Sounds good. Now, it is not very often that you do hear about the multicultural affairs of our country making it in the front news, and I believe you have, with that report, made headlines. Yeah,
we did. It's interesting. It hardly ever makes the news, and some people don't like the word. The fact is we are a multicultural country. Like, people have migrated from every part of the world to Australia and become Australian.
If you don't mind interrupting me, Peter,
sure.
You are yourself of Egyptian background, correct?
That's right, Egyptian background. My parents migrated back in 1970 from Egypt, and we're all from somewhere. The Greek communities, the Italian communities that came post-World War II to build something in this new country for themselves and for their children and their grandchildren. The hard work, the work ethic, the resilience, the tenacity to come from the other side of the world to build something in Australia. And that's not a unique story. It's shared by millions of Australians because we're all effectively migrants. Now, multiculturalism is not just about the food and the dancing and the costumes. You get a lot of these politicians who crap on about that and carry on about that. It's not just about the souvlaki's and the spaghetti.
Absolutely.
And I hate it when the politicians get up there and that's all they talk about, because they're missing the main point, which is that migrants to this country, their values that they brought have actually enriched this country. Their hard work, their commitment to the country, despite the challenges that many face. My parents came from Egypt. We started off in South Melbourne, a housing commission there, a lot of Greek families as well, many who came into Port Melbourne. And they worked really, really hard to build up businesses. They worked hard to give their children a chance at a good education. These are the values, and the commitment of those communities that have made Australia such a successful country. And so multiculturalism has got to be more than just a buzzword, John. It can't just be, as I said, the food and the costumes and sure, let's celebrate all that, but it's so much more than that.
I totally agree with you, Peter. And in fact, as you say, a lot of emphasis has been put on those insignificant, I may say, in agreement with you, aspects of a culture. And as you said, there's much more depth. And yet this country, this beautiful country of ours, has allowed people from all different sorts of backgrounds to thrive, especially in the business sector. And as we discussed earlier in our conversation off air, that does not reflect in certain other areas of the hierarchy of our country.
Well, isn't that an interesting thing? Because migrants are twice as likely to start a business. A third of small businesses in this country are owned by migrants, and I see it every day. In my own electorate on Sydney Road, every second business there is owned by a migrant, run by a migrant. It's driven by necessity and opportunity. And the success, I think, is driven by those values of hard work and resilience that migrants certainly have in spades. And a lot of the Greeks and Italians that came to this country, the Egyptians, the Lebanese, and Vietnamese later, they really built up a great deal of success because of that hard work ethic, particularly in business. But when you look at other sectors of the economy, so of the 2,500 leaders in our country, in our parliaments, our federal ministers and MPs, when you look at the boardrooms of the top companies, the CEOs, the courtrooms, the vice-chancellors at universities, it's a very different story. And in fact, there are only, like just in politics, for example, there's only, less than 10% of the parliament out of 227 MPs. If you just count the Southern Europeans, like the Italians and the Greek background, it's less than 10%. That's not reflective of the actual number of those communities in the broader population. So why aren't they getting into politics? If you look at the boardrooms, 95% are, mainly Anglo. Or you look at the vice-chancellors of universities, very few are of a non-Anglo background. Or you look at the courtrooms and the judges, virtually non-existent. So why aren't the opportunities there for those migrant communities coming through? And a lot of people actually say to me, wow, it's too hard. I'm not going to put myself going through politics. I get it. It is a difficult pathway. It's too hard for the other staff in the corporate boardrooms and so on. There was language difficulties. We were much better going through business and being successful in business where we weren't, there was challenges, but we weren't blocked, as it were.
So why do you think...
Is,
sorry.
I was going to say, John, why are we denying still or not opening up the opportunities for that human talent that comes from all our different communities in lots of other sectors of the economy? Of the 2,500 leaders that I said, 76% are Anglo.
Yeah.
And only 19% of European background, 4.7% from a non-European background.
So what do you think? Why do you think that is so? Why do you think that the opportunities are not there for those areas for people of non-Anglo background to make it and rise high in the ranks?
I think it's a combination of factors. Even me getting into politics was really, really hard to do. There is a kind of barrier that exists that is a cultural bias. Let's just be honest about it.
Yeah.
If you're a Greek background, not so long ago we were being called wogs on the street or in the workplace, and it was and that was a kind of a common thing.
And perhaps the only reason we're not called that nowadays is because they found a different scapegoat, people from different backgrounds.
Well, that's exactly right, and also that's less acceptable now. But that doesn't mean the structural barriers aren't there.
Yeah.
And the club, that sort of concentration. It's about power structures, John. Let's be clear about that. Power is controlled by groups. That's part of human nature, and groups coalesce around either ethnicity or faith. It wasn't long ago that the Protestants shut out the Irish in Australia. You remember that?
Yeah.
Historically, was a big thing in this country early in the 20th century, where the Irish Australians were really shut out of positions and the power structures by the Anglos. So that happens in a lot of societies. I'm saying that's a waste of our talent. Like, how many more people of a diverse background could actually be making a contribution as a CEO or a board member or making a contribution in academia at the highest levels or in the courtrooms? That's a waste of our latent talent.
All right. Well, I think there's certain issues, if I may say, for example, national issues, foreign affairs issues, that it would be great to have a bipartisan approach. Regardless of who is into power, there should be one kind of direction as a nation. And I think multiculturalism and the way our system is structured is another issue of similar importance, that we need a bipartisan approach. Now, you launched your report on these very interesting issues. Is there any indication that perhaps the two major parties of our nation could have a similar approach in issues such as foreign policy and the way our country is moving forward in relation to its identity? Because we do have an issue of an identity, and I see my Australian identity perhaps different than an Anglo background person sees his identity.
Sure.
We need to mould, I believe, into to one uniting identity as a whole, as a nation. We are developing, of course, as we speak, but I think it's about time we try to overcome certain biases that we do have, and because I feel myself 1,000% Australian, which does not take away at all my Greek background and my love for my mother country.
Yeah, I think just to address the second part of your question around identity, you've hit the mark here. Multiculturalism, in a sense, is more about the deeper core issue of our national identity, who we are as a people. Who are we? What is our identity? And you are right, whether you're a Greek Australian or Italian Australian or Egyptian Australian like me or a Vietnamese Australian or Lebanese or whatever it might be, you can be very proud to be Australian. You can be 1,000% Australian and still maintain your cultural heritage. That's part of what it means to be an Australian.
Absolutely.
We can maintain that. We don't have to choose between our identities, and that's actually a positive. But there are political forces in this country who would seek to divide us based on that identity and try and set us apart and use the politics of fear and hatred to get short-term political gain. That's something that we're constantly, and I'm cognizant of my responsibility to push back against. You know, we are all Australians, and part of the report, the work that I've done, and as a Member of Parliament, is to try and do my best to ensure that our laws and our policies that we deliver to the Australian people ensure that no matter what your background is, your ethnicity, your face background, whatever it is, irrespective of background, that you have the same social, economic and political opportunities as any other Australian. And I don't see that is happening now. The numbers are suggesting that is not happening. There's success in business, for example, but it's not happening elsewhere. And we need to have a reckoning around our identity and the fact that we are a diverse country and a pluralistic country, and that we can celebrate and engage around our diversity and the strengths of who we are, but it doesn't mean that we have to choose. So I agree with you on that. On your first point about, I think you were mentioning about the government having bipartisanship. There was a lot of bipartisanship around multicultural policy, particularly in Victoria, with the Liberal Party and the Labor Party. I think that was a good thing and has been for a very long time. Federally, it started to break down a little bit, to be honest, where the dog whistling that I have seen in federal politics, on the conservative side of politics at least, on this stuff, and even on the Labor side, not dog whistling, but certainly focusing on only one part of multiculturalism, which is the sort of anti-racism part. It's like, I don't want to be in a spot either where we infantilise our multicultural communities, our diverse communities. We should be empowering those people, you know, to succeed in all of those areas. They're not there just to be looked after. They're not all victims. Yep. I mean, that's not the narrative I seek to further. So I'm saying I'm being sort of open about the issues that we need to address as well. We need to empower communities and say, that doesn't matter where you come from, you're an Australian, you will have the same opportunities, and it's a quality of opportunity. That's what I got from Labor governments in the past, from the Hawke government. You know, I got a chance at a good education. I got public housing, education, healthcare. And all the Greeks that were in our neighbours, you know, same thing. We got that opportunity to based on our hard work and our merit and our effort, we were able, and our access to a good education is to then achieve our full potential. I want that to be available to all Australians, regardless of their background. And I'm concerned that that is not happening right now, and that people just, you know, okay, it's great for the Prime Minister, he's doing his curry cook-up, you know, like he shows that he's making a curry, but that's not multiculturalism. That's not about opportunity. That's just shallow theatrics at the political level. A good substantive policy is what's needed to ensure that the next generation of Australians have the same opportunities.
Your plan sounds good to me, and I do hope voices like yours, from whichever party they come from, are heard often enough for policy to be accompanying those cries. Thank you very much, Peter, for your time. It was a pleasure to have you with us, and we will talk whenever.
Can I say one last thing?
Absolutely, go for it.
I know I was talking about not talking about food and drink and all that, but the one important phrase that I do know in Greek is "Erisero retsina se parakalo," which is very important when you go out.
Absolutely. If you like retsina, that is. Thank you very much. Kalinichta.
Καληνύχτα, ευχαριστώ πολύ.
Παρακαλώ, see you. That was
There you go.
Peter Cahill, federal member of Wales of the Labor Party, talking to us about his views of multiculturalism, what it really means.